Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I will be reviewing a self-published dark fantasy novel by Daniel Greene known as Rebel's Creed. This is the full-length novel follow-up to the novella Breach of Peace, which was released earlier this year. I'm going to be spoiler-free in this video. However, I might delve into some situational spoilers that some people might consider that, but I won't go into specific details at all. This book, to begin with, improves a lot on the problems that the first book had, but at the same time creates a whole new set of problems that the first book didn't have. And so it's kind of a mixed bag. Overall, I did enjoy the book, and I had a good time reading it, but there are just a few issues that I have with the book as a whole, and I'll get to them. The first thing I'll say about the book is that the plot in Rebel's Creed is much better than the plot in Breach of Peace. Part of the problem for Daniel Greene was that in Breach of Peace, it was more chaotic. You were, first of all, being thrown into the world, so you're trying to catch up. And then it's such a short book, it's such a short novella that you don't really have time to truly be immersed. By the time you're starting to understand what's happening, the novella's over. Here, however, in about 60,000 words, he's able to truly immerse yourself into the world of his book. And he's able to make you understand the magic system, the politics, the events, the plot that's happening, and it's a much more expansive and fun plot, I think. I had a much more fun time reading this book than I did reading Breach of Peace. That being said, there were some issues that I had that I make it so that I actually rated it a little bit lower than Breach of Peace, but the enjoyment of the book was actually very good. As I mentioned, the world building. The world building is fantastic in this book. It is spot on. The way that he builds the rebel society, the way that he builds the empire, the way that he builds the police, the way that he builds just the everyday lives of the characters is just wonderful. The way that he's able to tell essentially two stories and combine them into one to make it cohesive, because this is basically his idea for two different novellas that he basically smushed into one novel. It works really well. I was afraid this would just feel like two novellas that were completely separate, but it turns out no, these are very intricately connected and very well done. The first half of the book takes place kind of concurrently / beforehand of Breach of Peace and follows Chapman's character and everything that's going on with him, and I just loved seeing him getting involved with the rebels. It's very much similar to some of the episodes of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, where you see this kind of rebel faction on the planet of Onderon, and you see them slowly build and work with spies to take over this city. And so it was that whole sequence in the beginning of the book was very enjoyable. The second half of the book is kind of a detective mystery, but at the same time kind of follows some of the more dark fantasy tropes of, all right, we're in the city, we got to stop the bad guy. If you've ever read, it's like a darker version of Mistborn, if you've read that. I can't go into why without spoiling, but it's like a darker version of Mistborn. And I like the main characters. I find that they're engaging. Holden is a funny character. I think he's great. I think that Reki is also fun. I think that some of the other characters that he creates are good. There are some great twists in this book, some fantastic twists, and the villain is just so cold and calculating, while at the same time personable, and so I really like the way he did the villain. Now on to some of my negatives. This book has a lot of gratuitous scenes in it. First of all, there's a ton of language in this book. There is as much language per page as I would say there was in Breach of Peace, and potentially more. So it's constantly, almost every page, there's swear words. And I get that that was what Daniel Greene was going for, but it makes it difficult to stay focused on the book because every time I read them, I just cringed. For one thing, in this fictitious world, they use the same types of swear words as us. The second issue I had is that it's just not pleasant to read. And I get that this is a dark fantasy, but I just don't enjoy reading when an author just spews language throughout their books. That's one of the reasons I enjoy books like The Wheel of Time or the books like The Cosmere, because they create their own swear words, and so it's not like reading ours own from Earth. Another reason I didn't like this book is that is a lot of sexual elements to it. Not just a sex scene that happens, but characters offhandedly make references to sex stuff just in normal conversation, and as a result, you can't just skip the sexual elements. You can't just vid angel it. It's just there, and it's just unnecessary throughout. There's ways you can show certain characters' relationships and dynamics without showing actual sex scenes, and it was just so frustrating to read through all of that. The third thing that bothered me, but it didn't bother me nearly as much as the first two, was the gore. This is a very gory book. It is a grimdark fantasy novel. It is not your traditional epic fantasy where all the gore is off the page, off screen. You are seeing a lot of it. Most of it I was able to handle, but there were just a few pages where I was like, you could have just taken those pages out, that paragraph out, and you would have gotten across how disturbing they are without going full on into Gorefest territory. And so it's kind of like the argument of you have the first Halloween movie, which has like no gore, but is still terrifying, versus the Saw movies, which are just all gore, torture stuff. And it's like the first Halloween shows that you can show how horrific a villain is without actually showing the stuff happening. And so that's why the gore was just a little bit too much, but it doesn't bother me quite as much as the language or the sexual elements. But I want to go back to some of the positives, because I think there are some great positives to this book that I haven't mentioned. Another positive that I have is the way that it sets up the future. I wasn't sure how many books this series would be. I knew that he had a plan in the general future for where he wanted to go. And if you've watched Daniel Greene's videos, you may know where he's going with this. But when I read this scene where they basically reveal what the rebels' plans are, I got super excited, because I don't believe this has happened often in fantasy. And I think that this is a direction that I'd like to see more fantasy books go, because it's just most fantasy books are very self-contained in a certain way, whereas Daniel Greene is kind of expanding beyond the boundaries of where they've been going. And of course, have to be vague about that, but if you read the book, you'll know exactly what I'm referring to. And so I thoroughly enjoyed what he's setting up in this book. And he does pay off so much in this book. It is a complete book. There is a cliffhanger at the end, but it is not as heavy a cliffhanger as was at the end of Breach of Peace. But this is a very complete novel. He tells a good beginning, middle, and end of the story. He tells a good narrative of tying up from the book before, while at the same time leaving us wanting more. So it does all of the things that a traditional novel should do. And so overall, I enjoyed the book. As I mentioned, I did have those issues with the book, but they're, in the grand scheme of things, not huge issues that they completely take me out of the book and make me hate it. I still enjoyed the book. I don't think it is my favorite book of the year or anything even remotely close, but it is very much enjoyable. So I would give Rebels Creed a 6.5 out of 10. Very well worth it, and over time, I may enjoy it more and may bump it up to a 7.0 out of 10, but I thoroughly enjoyed this book. So, let me know what you thought of Daniel Greene's new book, Rebels Creed, in the comments. Tell me what you also thought of Breach of Peace. Let me know if you think I should do more self-published books on the channel. And please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.